Welcome back to another episode on the Derm Club podcast, where I interview some of the prominent dermatologists and skin experts across the world. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe or wherever you get your podcasts. So let's jump into today's topic. Every day, women and men around the world apply cosmetics to their skin. These makeup products used happen to be formulated with many different chemicals, some of which are not safe for our skin. I am excited about today's podcast as we're going to focus on the efficacy of cosmetic ingredients. You know what? I want to start over because there was one error in my introduction. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
For my panel. Okay.
Okay, great. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Derm Club podcast, where I interview some of the prominent dermatologists and skin experts across the world. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe. So let's jump into today's topic. Every day, women and men around the world apply cosmetics to their skin. These makeup products used happen to be formulated with many different chemicals, some of which are not safe for our skin. I am excited about today's podcast as we're going to focus on the efficacy of cosmetic ingredients. To give us insight into the safety and the risk of ingredients used in makeup, I have the pleasure of having Dr. Wilma Bergfeld, a well-respected female dermatologist who for the past 4 decades has been a member and the chair of the Cosmetic Ingredient Expert Panel, an expert panel that determines the safety of cosmetic ingredients. In addition to her vital contributions in helping to make sure that we have standards in place for the cosmetics we use, Dr. Bergfeld also has served many different roles across the spectrum of dermatology. It would be impossible to list all of her accolades, but I will give you a small taste. Dr. Bergfeld is Emeritus Director and Co-Director of Dermatopathology at Cleveland Clinic. She also is the director of the Cleveland Clinic's Dermatopathology Fellowship. She's a former chair and current consultant to the FDA Dermatology Advisory Committee. She's a former president of the American Dermatologic Association, past president of North American Hair Research Society, and director of World Congress of Hair Research. She has contributed greatly to encouraging more women to enter the field of dermatology, and in fact, in 1996, she received the Women's Dermatological Association Rose Hirschler Award, honoring an outstanding physician who has contributed to medicine and dermatology while enhancing the role of women in dermatology. Dr. Bergfeld, I want to welcome you to the Derm Club podcast. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here.
What chemicals do you avoid in your skincare, and which ingredients should we avoid? You know, it's very hard to know. There's so much out there. Can you walk us through what we should really avoid and not use on our skin?
Well, I'd like to speak as the chair of the Cosmetic Ingredient Review Panel that looks at safety of cosmetic ingredients in cosmetic formulations. And even though you started with those that are unsafe, I can assure you that the chemicals that are in your ingredients today in these formulations are safe. We have weeded out something like 12 out of 6,000 ingredients that were considered unsafe or scientific information not enough to prove safety. Now, as a dermatologist looking at formulations, there are specifics, obviously, that we would avoid. And we are now, interestingly enough, looking at a lot of our hair diseases where the patient has scalp dysesthesia or pain or discomfort. And many of these have hair cosmetic allergies. And in fact, the frontal fibrosing alopecia, about 50% of these patients have allergies to fragrance. So we're a little bit more focused on patients with scalp discomfort. And what we might have done in the past is to say they all had seborrheic dermatitis, or they were crazy, or they had cervical disc problems. But now we have opened up the Pandora's box about skin sensitivity. Mm-hmm. Now, going back to the cosmetic ingredient decision making, on most of the products that have a fragrance or even a preservative activity, the comment is made in the conclusion for safety that these ingredients should not produce a sensitivity.
Okay.
Or they should not, and that includes the preservatives.
It's
The
interesting.
toxicology studies show them to be safe, but sensitivity, irritation are things that we have to say if they have the slightest bit of information that says that it might do this, the conclusion includes that this should not happen. And so it's up to the formulator, the cosmetic industry, the cosmetic company to formulate them, and they can do that. They can dilute them down. Another problem that we have in that same sort of category of interest is that the botanicals frequently have fragrances in them as well as other allergens in them. And many times in one product, all you have to do is look at the ingredient list. You'll see multiple botanicals in one product. Whether it's helpful and they could have derived the same chemical from another product, another plant, or synthetically, is not being done today. And that one of the reasons is that natural botanicals are being marketed as the safest for you.
Mm-hmm.
I can honestly tell you the botanicals, plant sourced, have the least amount of information about them. Right. So they're not particularly safe. Natural is not particularly safe because you don't understand what's in them. We do have information about the categories. Chemists have looked at some of these particular plant ingredients or chemicals. So we do have something, but frequently multiple botanicals are put in one product. And whether there's a cascade event of multiple low dose botanicals that can do sensitization, it's a possibility. And here again, in the discussions under all these ingredients, now 6,000 of them, in the discussion of each peer-reviewed journal article that we write, we put that this should not happen. That single or multiple botanicals in a cosmetic formulation should not produce sensitization or irritation. So I've found over all these years, 40 plus, this has been a very exciting part of my career to learn all about this. But I do want to emphasize that the cosmetic industry, through now the PCPC, which is formerly the CTFA, have worked very hard to make sure that cosmetics were clean and non-sensitizing. Now, this is true across the world because in every major country, Europe being grouped, there are committees such as ours working on the same premise that everything should be safe that's applied to the skin.
Well, thank you for your work. I have a few questions based off what you said. One is, so you see oftentimes you see organic. Do these botanicals fall into that organic category?
Yes, organic would be the same. So, and hopefully organic would not include animal parts. Because with animal parts, we made a declaration a number of years ago, perhaps as long as 15 years ago, especially when the prion problem came up, that animal parts, if used, should be free of infectious agents.
Do you tell patients often avoid organic products?
No, I tell them that it's sort of like the naturals, the botanicals. We don't know so much about the chemistry of these. Okay. Now, they do occasionally have animal testing for them and rarely have patch testing, repeat insult patch testing. We also have information for the American Contact Dermatitis Group and the European Contact Dermatitis Group and the Japanese and so forth. So we feed into all of this the information about an ingredient chemical. And obviously for allergens, there is a threshold of concentration. Now that's important to remember. And so the cosmetic industry is warned they should stay below that threshold, or even if it's in a combined botanical formulation, all ingredients should be below as collected together.
How about in terms of marketing the product? Do you have any say over, like, if you're going to label your product as organic, you should warn the patients that we don't know, there's not a lot of scientific data about how safe it is on your skin, or there's no clause that says that?
Well, first of all, we're a group that looks at the science between the chemistry of each ingredient chemical, not the formulation. Our information is then open to the FDA, the cosmetic section of the FDA. The FDA, if they feel it's a great risk to the public, then engages the Department of Justice, and they would go after the company that was promoting this particular formulation. We have no political activity. We present only the science, which is presented in the International Journal of Toxicology, a very outstanding peer-reviewed journal, and have done this for plus 40 years, as I said. But it is the FDA that would have to begin the activity of the federal government to be involved. Now, the FDA frequently will, if they see something, for instance, the Brazilian blowout, which was a formaldehyde releaser. Our committee said it was unsafe. And then the FDA did send out some warning to the public regarding this. Sitting on this panel is not only dermatologists, toxicologists, pediatric toxicologists, I'm trying to think, chemists, a veterinary medicine, PhD, and 3 dermatologists, the FDA, consumer representative, and the PCP representative. In the audience, and the audience can give comment when these ingredients are under discussion, are members of the industry who have these ingredients in their products. We deal with unpublished literature, meaning what the company has in-house that they have done to test the safety of their particular ingredient or an end product. So it is a very interesting committee to work on, or a panel to work on, because the knowledge is so broad. In addition to that, the CIR administrative staff is made up of toxicologists and chemists, and they do the background searching for all this information. And there's a staff that requests information from various sources. So when the panel comes together, we have all the information that can be gleaned from anywhere, worldwide companies. And, public opinion, every document goes out for public opinion for 60 days. And anyone that cares to follow this particular process has the ability to comment and call our attention to something. The voices, let me see what it's called. The women's voices of the earth are particularly responsive. And we have letters from them for each meeting on many ingredients, citing things that they have found and what they want us to look at. And we address all of these.
Wow. I could see that these meetings can be very time consuming and arduous.
2 days, 4 times a year. And the prep is thousands of pages to read.
Wow. So I want to take the conversation back. You mentioned frontal fibrosing alopecia, which is also known as FFA. There have been many discussions over the past few years as there was an uptick in FFA, especially in premenopausal women. It used to be considered a postmenopausal disease, and now we're seeing it in much younger women. People are saying that it may be due to sunscreen. So you mentioned that in FFA patients, that it's seen that they have a sensitivity to cosmetic products. Fragrances. So do you believe that the correlation is there, that FFA is caused by fragrances that are in sunscreen?
Well, the sunscreen, when it first came out, was the titanium. That was found that there was titanium in the scalp skin. And in the sunscreens, that have SPF over 30, they have minerals. titanium and zinc. And it was thought that maybe that was causing it.
Right.
Hypersensitivity or allergic reactions in the scalp came later. Dr. Senna out of Harvard did the first publication of 40% showing sensitivity. Since then, there have been multiple publications, and including our experience here at the Cleveland Clinic. Anyone with any kind of scalp problem, we have to do patch testing on. And the amount of allergy we're finding is phenomenal. Would never expect it because you don't see it on the skin.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see it. So there are two differences. But interestingly enough, in the recent literature, the genes for FFA have been established. So there appears to be a genetic component, and it may be triggered by something. We're still sort of in limbo as to understanding it, but certainly in my practice, I have all my patients on non-fragrant products for scalp. And also for sunscreens, I say stay away from your hairlines and your eyebrows.
Okay.
So we don't really know, but a little caution is helpful.
More research has to be done, and I'm sure.
It's a Rolling Stone kind of thing. It's coming.
Okay. So, you mentioned preservatives. What is the reason we want to avoid them? I've read that they mimic.
Well, you can't avoid preservatives, or your formulation doesn't last.
Okay.
So again, there are multiple preservatives and a limited number of preservatives available, and they are in lower concentrations now. And some of them are the MI preservative is being controlled by concentration right now. But they're adding multiple preservatives as they do in other products to make sure that the product is preserved and not overrun with colonization of infectious agents. Most shelf lives are under 6 months.
Are you concerned that the preservatives are mimicking estrogen? I've read some reports that people think that it may be mimicking estrogen, and then there's concern for that they're carcinogens or causing breast cancer.
Hogwash. Doesn't happen.
No.
Okay. I mean, the consumers are looking for all kinds of things. Usually, the fears for cancer are something ingested because of such a higher concentration. On the skin, it's a much lower concentration. Now, when we talk about scalp, the absorption is very high on the scalp. Now, a mimicker of estrogen, usually the plant estrogens are not effective. And that's been shown in some of the literature. The only thing I can say is that I had one patient that ate so much soy that she was able to get her estradiol up to 200. But most of the time, you can't increase it in the postmenopausal women over 20.
Was she vegan?
Yeah.
Okay.
But soy was in everything. And I had never seen that before. And I always check the hormones on these patients. So I'd never seen that before. But she was ingesting an awful lot of soy every day. Wow. Now, I don't remember the volume, but it was like multiple products in one meal and snacks. So I'm not buying there's any carcinogenicity in any of these. And we've looked at a lot of the ingredients in these particular products, and we haven't seen that. Never been a hazard.
How about parabens?
Nope. Parabens are all the active ones have all been removed. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the things that occurred when the review. Now, we've reviewed parabens at least 3 times. Every time it comes up in the consumer interest, we review it again, and we've still not changed our mind. But we have altered what parabens should be in a product, and they're the ones that were considered maybe are taken out.
So it sounds like there's been a lot of progress in removing the chemicals that weren't safe and keeping the cosmetics safer.
Well, I don't know why cosmetics have gotten a bad rap. If anyone had reviewed the chemicals that are published on the CIR website, they would find out that most of these are pretty benign as they're being used. And We did remove several hair dyes because of questionable carcinogens and their coal tar derivatives.
Formaldehyde as well.
And formaldehyde, we restricted it to a low dose. Concentration is very important. As I said, there are thresholds for everything. So concentration restriction is important. But the CIR has a compendium on all the ingredients that they have reviewed. It is on the website. It is possible to print that off or look at it frequently if you're engaged in looking at the ingredients in a product. I think that also the contact dermatitis experts are going to be very helpful to us because they haven't concentrated on the scalp that much.
Right.
It's a more recent activity.
So how do you guide your patients or recommend which products to pick or which ones are clean and safe?
Well, I said everything was safe. So it's not clean and safe. But well, how does it fit the person's skin? I have a global way of approaching this. You should always buy from a major cosmetic house. And the reason for that is that they have unbelievable research going on constantly. So their products are well developed. The other, sometimes the drugstores are making generics. They too are at risk for adverse events. So they too are depending on the research in the background that was done by the cosmetic houses because they're formulating a generic off of a standard product.
Right.
But there's so much marketing out there about one product being better than the other and no comparisons.
Yeah.
So I think and we're talking about cosmetics, so mainly the face and the scalp. I think that you have to choose a product line or products that you like that doesn't give you acne or pimples or whiteheads. I think that you have to consider cleansing the face at least twice a day, unless there are other activities that you would do it more. So you need a cleanser, and some people will throw in a toner. The cleansers are interesting. They should be something that is classified as gentle, so they would be less irritating. A moisturizer, and now, the ingredients in the moisturizers have changed a little bit. We've had the fruit acids, now we have some enzymes being put in, and the retinoids, salts rather than the retinoic acid. These are also very nice, but as you know, the retinoids have to be used at night. But there's a moisturizer, and then an evening cleansing program and a moisturizer. Now, if you're specifically treating something like brown spots, you may want to choose a product that says it has some mild bleaching ability. Once they get into bleaching ability, though, they are OTCs. They are not cosmetics.
Right. So it's different, totally
different review system.
How about in terms of pregnancy and breastfeeding? You have many women who often say, what should I avoid? Of course, you avoid the retin A products because they're vitamin A derivatives. But in terms of cosmetics, do you ever recommend a woman who's pregnant or breastfeeding to avoid a product that someone who isn't it's okay for?
Well, theoretically, they shouldn't use anything. But the reality of that is the retinoids have been accused, so they've been removed from use. But anything that has a real active in it does have an activity in the skin and may have a little bit of a systemic activity if it's put all over the body. So one would use a product that doesn't have fragrance in it, it has a controlled preservative in it, and something that they tolerate. Interesting enough, the shampoos that we use for dandruff have some very toxic ingredients that are toxic for killing off the yeast or the bacteria.
Like ketoconazole shampoo?
Like ketoconazole and Head and Shoulders and Selsun Blue with selenium sulfide in it, or the selenium sulfide shampoos or tars. We have not restricted those. But in actuality, they could be problematic.
Why?
Well, they're anti-androgens. I mean,
So,
I
I
have
mean,
other activities other than cleansing and killing the surface microorganisms. But we haven't restricted those. But I hear from my colleagues that do OB that they try to restrict many things, not only the foods and alcohol ingestion, but many things, including they want you to minimize your scalp, face, body cosmetics. But I don't think we have the studies there to say that anything we're using is unsafe right now.
do you believe that we like you talked about ketoconazole shampoo. I was thinking about benzoyl peroxide wash. If people have acne, many times they go in the shower, they put it on their back, sometimes on their face. They let it sit there for a few minutes and then they rinse it off. I recently did a podcast with Dr. Del Rosso about antibiotic resistance, and he said people don't think about that it's washing down to other places in the shower, and it could be creating antibiotic resistance in those areas.
Well, maybe he could better speak to that than I. He's a pharmacist by trade and also a dermatologist. But that's true. But it's so diluted by the time it reaches other parts of your body, it's probably inactive.
Okay.
So there is a difference between dilution, what they call rinse-off products, and leave-on products. And rinse-off products are not really a problem most of the time because of their dilution. This is my CIR hat I'm telling you about.
You said to me about preservatives being in low concentrations. Is it marked on bottles sometimes you see
No, it doesn't. No concentrations are marked. The ingredients are listed as to the ones most frequent and the highest volume. And you'll notice that water is always at the top.
So you're saying people should aim to buy products where the preservatives are at that bottom of the list.
Well, that they always are.
Okay.
Pretty much always. Or in the middle. A lot of fatty acids put in products for lubrication. Vehicles.
Do you think that with using makeup and cosmetics is changing the microbiome of our skin?
Well, again, I don't think that's ever been tested, but my personal opinion is probably it's the cleansers. And then when you put an occlusive product on the face, like anything with color, you're occluding a pore that contains these microorganisms. And if you get heated and sweat, you have a garden full of microorganisms growing. So I think that if you're going to wear an occlusive makeup, which all the cover-ups are, that you need to make sure you wash it off at night. So you have at least 8 hours or close to 8 hours of skin being sort of clean and not occluded. I would never use anything too oily on the face. I mean, what happens to those pores is quite interesting. I'm also a pathologist, so we see a lot of dilated pores filled with bacteria and yeast and Demodex. Yeah. So I think that we're never going to stop women from putting makeup on their face or blushes or whatever. But we do have to stick with the fact you do have to clean your face and your scalp.
So don't go to bed with makeup on.
Absolutely not. Of course, your mother told you that. That's not you.
So, Dr. Bergfeld, I want to wrap this up and just ask you how you got involved in forming this committee.
Oh, the panel, the CIR panel? Well, that was very, very interesting if you have just a few moments to listen. At the time, I was advocating for women to present at the American Academy of Dermatology. And Dr. Shelley, who was then chair at the University of Pennsylvania, decided there weren't enough women participating in the academy. So he had Miriam Reed, was one of his volunteer faculty, send a letter to all the women. At that time, we represented a very small percentage, probably under 15% of all the members of the American Academy of Dermatology, and had come to a meeting to discuss this. And about 50 women showed up, which was a lot at that time. And she presented this. And there was a gal who was a third generation dermatologist from the Carolinas who got up and said, we don't need any of this. Well, had come in late and I was standing at the back and I was infuriated with that comment. So I got up and said, yes, we do. You're able to get on the program because your father, your grandfather, and whomever, his uncles are all dermatologists, but the rest of us are trying to get on the program. At the end of that meeting, the group formed the Women's Derm Society and named me the first president. And I was president for 7 years. Okay. So as president, representing all the women, supposedly dermatologists, there became an interest of the CTFA that they start a committee or panel to look at safety of ingredients because the consumers were raising that question. So the head, who was given the head at that time, called me, and I went through the roster of all the women I thought would be good for this job. There were women in contact dermatitis. There were some researchers. I had a list of about 20 people. So I sent it to him and he called me back and I explained these really great women, really qualified, and all participants in the academy. And he said, how about you? And I said, no, not me. I'm a pathologist and a clinical dermatologist. He said, I want you. So I was appointed. I didn't know what I'd bring to it. And the first meeting, they explained the job, and everybody else was 50 to 80 years old. And I was the youngest. I was 40. I was the youngest. And I said, this is going to take forever. This job. And lo and behold, it has taken forever. It was 6,000 in. Now, I became the leader. Oh God, it seems like 20 something, 30 years ago, maybe. And I would say, I'm very proud to say that no one wants me to leave as leader. And I've just said I was thinking about maybe I should retire. And he said, no, you can't retire. And when the FDA said that we should reassemble the panel, that we should have a rotation, this panel takes 5 years to learn your way around. So if you get rotating, you never have anybody that knows anything or how to do it. But they said, we want to keep Wilma Bergfeld. So here I am, the chair of this forever. And my contribution is I'm a more global thinker, and rather than minutia. And I have my panel members and the team, the administrative team, are minutia people. So I think that it works well, that we are able to address all the issues. Well, so anyhow, that's my story.
Thank you for what you do, because it's very impactful and important. I want to ask you before we sign off, if there's any last recommendations or tips that you can give to the makeup wearers or cosmetic wearers out there in the world, which is almost everybody.
No, don't be afraid of your cosmetics. But don't go with every marketing ploy. Get yourself a basic program and stick with it. And if you need something special, you might ask your dermatologist if there is a product that you could use to do whatever you want to do. Most of the products are going to decrease your wrinkles by about 16% or so. Even though they don't penetrate, they'll get the fine wrinkles and give you a better texture of your skin. And as far as cleaning, I think it's important to think of cleaning your skin, not just your face. So, but not scrubbing it, gentle cleaning, because it's important. You harbor 20 pounds of microorganisms in your body and a lot on your skin. We see them all the time in the biopsies. So cleansing and moisturizing, very important for scalp and face. And then add whatever cosmetics you need for color and, attractiveness.
Thank you, Dr. Bergfeld. Will you be speaking at the AAD?
Yeah, I'm going to be speaking. I don't think I'm going to do this again. I'm speaking on nutrition and hair.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And
I'm saying it's very impactful. Most women do not eat right. So I'm hoping to change some things.
So are you referring to mostly people who have thin hair? Definitely not my problem.
Well, Well, I think everyone that comes in and says they have a healthy diet probably doesn't. And, there are certain things you have to have. And protein is one. And Dr. Lynn Drake is particularly interested in protein. But there are other essential minerals and vitamins needed for the hair follicle to turn over. And the follicle has a cell line that's one of the fastest cell line turnovers in the body, the other being the marrow in the gut. You got to feed it to grow it. And I mean, then start with the diseases that occur. But if you're not feeding it, it's not growing.
So
And we saw that in the Second World War, all the concentration camps, all the hair fell out, thinner. So we have, good background information to support this, and the CDC does support certain mineral, protein, etc., essentials for good health.
So what do you recommend someone's diet should be?
I recommend, no matter if they're vegan or whatever, eat meat, whatever, I have at least 40 grams of protein a day. And if they aren't taking enough of the vegetables and fruits and a little bit of carbs, then we have to supply it by other means, pills.
Do you believe
supplements.
biotin is necessary?
I've always liked biotin.
Mm.
And we did a publication on biotin, the CIR. It's about 300 pages long. It's an exceedingly safe vitamin, H2. And the bad rap it's gotten recently is that because if you're taking biotin, you have thyroid tests, the assay is done with biotin. So it's probably not a correct interpretation of whatever you get. So if you stop the biotin a few days before and a few days after, you should be fine.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Derm Club podcast. If you found the discussion today to be valuable, please subscribe and share. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode as we continue to delve into dermatology and skincare with the world experts.